It has been over a week since the start of the war in Sudan between two generals and their forces. The conflict is a civil war on a military level. The fighting is between the Sudanese armed forces under the leadership of General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and another paramilitary force called the Rapid Support Force led by General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemeti. The Rapid Support Forces were created out of a Janjaweed, an Arab militia armed by the ousted President Omar al-Bashir's government. Hemeti was the leader of the Janjaweed. The group came to be known as Rapid Support Force in 2013. In the early 2000s, the Janjaweed have been accused of committing genocide in Darfur. The two generals with their forces are in crossfire fighting in the capital city of Khartoum and its surroundings. So far, more than 5 ceasefire have been announced and neither of the two sides held their promises. Both forces have been fighting to control strategic locations like the airport, presidential palace, and other important areas in Khartoum, the capital city. So far, hundreds of people have lost their lives and thousands are fleeing the capital Khartoum. In this video, I will explain why the two generals are fighting and how come in the first place Sudan has two different militaries under two different leaders. And also, I will provide 4 possible scenarios about the outcome of this war. Hello, welcome to my channel. This is Yonas Temnewa. Please like and share the video and remember to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. First, we need to go back into history and investigate the military's influence on the Sudanese political system to understand the current conflict in Sudan. Historically, Sudan has a long history of military coups. Since the independence of Sudan from British and Egypt rule, Sudan has had 6 successful military coups and 12 failed attempts of coups from the military. This clearly explains the military's deep involvement in the country's politics. Most of the Sudanese political analysts explain that the political parties in Sudan are the main reason for the calling of those military coups. In other words, the political parties politicize the military to their parties. Once the ruling party feels it will lose its power, they orchestrate everything for the military to take control. That is exactly what happened during the 1989 coup. It was planned by the political leader of the Islamist party, Hassan al-Turabi. He was the true architect of the coup. He brought the now ousted President Omar al-Bashir to power. Omar al-Bashir was chosen by Hassan al-Turabi's party to become the ruler because he was an Islamist first and a general at the time. One may wonder why Hassan al-Turabi didn't take control of the country and announced himself as the president instead of bringing military person to take over. The main reason Hassan al-Turabi did not take over the coup and put himself as the ruler was the fear from the West about the Islamist party. He planned this to show to the West that there was no political party, specifically his Islamist party, involved in the coup. And by doing this, he would prevent sanctions from the West. Moreover, right after the military took over the country, Hassan al-Turabi made his next move, which was part of the plan, and that was to go to prison. In other words, he voluntarily went to prison as a political prisoner to make it believable that he was not involved in the 1989 coup. However, Hassan al-Turabi missed an important fact from the history of the military, not to entrust power to a military man, specifically in a country with a history of military coups. The consequence of entrusting the power to the military was that Omar al-Bashir, with its military, refused to give power to Hassan Atrabi and its party, and ended up ruling Sudan for 30 years until he was overthrown by a popular uprising in 2019. Millions came out on the streets chanting power to the people. After months of protest, his own military stepped in and finally overthrew the 3 decades of Omar al-Bashir's rule. The 2019 revolution brought great hope to the people of Sudan. Even the international community welcomed the revolution, and many thought that finally this was a time for Sudan to prosper politically and economically. And the country was heading in the right direction when the Sovereign Council, which includes a ruling body of civilians and the army, selected Abdullah Hamdok to become the country's prime minister during the government's transitional period into a civilian role. I understand that I have taken longer to get to the main conflicts that are happening right now in Sudan, but bear with me. Returning to those events in the last 3 years is crucial to understanding how the two generals went to war against each other. So, Abdullah Hamdok served from 2019 to 2021 until a military coup put him under house arrest for a couple of weeks. Then, after the people demonstrated his arrest, he was reinstated as prime minister by agreeing to share power with the military. But shortly after being reinstated, he resigned as prime minister because the people protested the deal. He signed to share power with the military. Since 2022, the military and the leadership of Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the Rapid Support Force under the control of Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemeti, have been sharing the power to lead the country. So, how did the conflict start between the two generals? General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the leader of the Sudanese armed forces, suggested to Hemeti that he should integrate his rapid support forces into the Sudanese military and have one military within 2 years, because it does not make any sense to have two militaries with different leaders in one country. If we are to compare the numbers of the two forces, the Sudanese armed forces under Abdel Fattah al-Burhan have about 200,000 soldiers with 170 tanks, 389 heavy artillery, and 6,967 military vehicles, while the Rapid Support Forces under Hemeti has about 100,000 soldiers. The soldiers are loyal to Hemeti and mostly from the same tribe. They have about 10,000 armored vehicles with anti-aircraft weapons. So, the leader of the RSF agreed to Abdel Fattah's suggestion of integrating the Rapid Support Force into the Sudanese army. But instead of 2 years, he suggested that the integration happens within 10 years. I mean, Hemeti is a leader of one of the biggest forces in the country, and he controls many mineral resources in the country. All these wealths would have to be instantly given up, which would be for his disadvantage if he agrees to Abdel Fattah al-Burhan's suggestion of 2-year integrational terms. And that is why he suggested integration to happen within 10 years. Hemeti understood that the integration was a clever way for Abdel Fattah to eliminate him from his military. The two generals knew that integration was not possible. Thus, their only option was to fight each other until one of them was victorious in the conflict. Each general blames the other for firing the first bullet to start the war. No one knows for sure yet who started the conflict. Another explanation for the start of this conflict is that, given the history of political parties' involvement in asking the military to carry out a coup, might any political party have been engaged in starting the battle between General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and General Hemeti's forces? Time will definitely tell whether political parties are involved in this military civil war. So, here are 4 possible scenarios that could take place in this war between the two generals in Sudan. The first scenario is that the war will continue in the city until one of the forces take control of the big major cities in Sudan. In this case, it will be the Sudanese armed forces because they have the advantage of military power over the rapid support force of Hemeti. And in this case, Hemeti will pull his troops to Darfur, where he formerly led the Janjaweed militia. He would continue his war campaign from Darfur until a joint solution that benefits the two parties is found. In the second scenario, both sides would agree to cease fire and the two generals sit at one table with mediators from the Arab world and the West and began a military trial that would result in the integration of the remaining rapid support unit into the Sudanese military. And in the third scenario, there will be a ceasefire and both parties consent to having equal standing in their positions as generals, but under the condition that the rapid support forces refrain from interfering with the country's electoral process during the transitional phase of the government. And the fourth extreme scenario that will destroy Sudan is for international forces with an interest in the country to intervene and arm all of their preferred forces. This scenario will lead to a brutal civil war in Sudan, and we will have another Yemen, Syria, and Libya in the region. It's reported that hundreds have been killed and a humanitarian crisis is on the way if the war between the two militaries continue. At the end of the day, the ugly truth is that there is one part that will pay the ultimate price if the war continues. That is the people of Sudan. Let us pray that both sides come to their senses and stop the war. Thank you everyone for watching and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks again.